In this video we're going to tie a small emerger called the short wing emerger, developed by Rene Harrop. I was introduced to this fly in Montana, and since it's been one of my favorite little emerger patterns. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to tie in the tail, and for the tail we're going to use some mallard. And we're only going to cut just a few strands. You got to be careful not to overdo it on the tail on this fly, and we want this tail to be about the length of the shank of the hook. So I just kind of roughly measure it out. We're going to tie this right on top of the shank of the hook. And we're just going to wrap back up onto the tail until we get to the bend. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to tie in some wire, and the wire adds just enough weight to this fly so that it sits in the film or barely breaks the surface tension of the water. That's how this fly is designed to be fished, is either in the film or nymphed with very little weight just below the surface of the water. I have fished it both ways, and it is effective fishing both of those ways. And you can use either copper or gold wire. I'm going to use copper just because it stands out a little bit more on the PMD body. The gold tends to kind of just blend in, and I'm looking for that little bit of segmentation. I'm just going to take that wire all the way back to the tail. Now the next thing to do is to dub the body. And I'm just going to use some PMD dubbing. This can also be tied in gray and also olive for blue winged olive, as well as black for tricos or brown. It can be tied in any of the traditional mayfly colors. PMD is one of my favorites, and that was the one I was first introduced to. We're just going to start our dubbing right here at the back of the fly. And we're just going to dub a nice even tapering body forward. And we're going to wrap about 2/3 of the way forward. Put a little bit more dubbing on here. Once I get to that 2/3 point, we can stop. I'm going to take this wire and I'm going to counter wrap it around my dubbing. Counter wrapping makes it stand out a little bit more and also helps lock down the material. Then I can capture the wire with my thread. Once I have the wire captured, you can just spiral it out of there. Now the next thing to do is to add the legs. And for the legs we're going to use just a little bit of partridge. I'm going to stroke back a partridge feather, just exposing the tips of the feathers. We want a nice little clump of about 20 or so little fibers. We're going to tie these in so that these fibers just barely touch the point of the hook. I just kind of do a nice loose wrap with my thread to position the fibers underneath the fly. I want to make sure they're right in the middle. Once we have those tied in, we can trim out the butt ends. Now we're ready for the magic of the fly. This is the part that makes this fly fish so well. That is the wings. Basically what I've done is I've taken two mallard wing feathers that are opposite wings. I've cut little notches out of them. You want to kind of make sure you buy the whole wing set, and you want each feather to be the opposite so that these wing pieces splay away from each other. I'll kind of show you what I mean here. You can see each of these pieces, how they splay very subtly, but they splay away from each other. That is pretty important to this fly. So what we're going to do is we're going to tie in these wings with the tips facing back and splaying away from the fly. And these wings, we want to tie them in fairly short. These wings are only about the length of the body. And you can do it one at a time, like I'm going to do here, or you can do it both, do them both at the same time. What I like to do is just pinch them into place, do a loose wrap with thread, and a second loose wrap, and then pull down nice and tight. Then you can do that with your second feather. Got to be careful that you don't tear them apart or separate the pieces. You want them to kind of stay together. And if the pieces roll on you, you can very carefully position them into the position that you would like. Once you get them into position, you can trim out the excess very carefully. This one rolled on me a little bit. We'll see if we can't roll him back into place here. There we go. Then you can trim them out. Clean up the head a little bit. We want to build a little conical taper to the head. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our PMD dubbing once again. We're going to apply a very, very small amount to our thread. We don't want to overdo it at this point. I'm just going to build up a slight taper to the head. It's going to taper forward. Add just a little bit more here. Just a smidgen. I try to dub it as tightly as I can so that the fibers blend into the shank of the hook. Then you can whip finish. That is a short wing emerger. Doesn't really look like much. It actually looks kind of like a funky little fly with its wings laid down. But don't underestimate it. Like I said, it's one of my favorite little mayfly emergers. I like these legs on the bottom portion of the fly to really kind of stand out and give them a little pull. That's all there is to the short wing merger. Great little fly on the spring creeks in Montana. That's where I was first introduced to it. And you can find all the materials to tie this fly on our website, intheriffle.com. If you're watching this via YouTube, just below the video in the description, there is a link to our website. There you can follow that link to find the recipe information as well as the materials to tie the fly. And that is the short wing emerger.